Some paintings don't hang on walls, they hover, they wait. There are works of art that feel like windows, and then there are works that feel like doors. And Leonora Carrington's art, at least the first time it truly lands, doesn't feel like you're looking into something. It feels like something is looking out at you. A stare that isn't passive, a world that isn't decorative, a myth that isn't borrowed but built. A doorway opens and you feel it in your ribs. I first truly met Carrington through a BBC documentary that called her the Lost Surrealist. And I don't mean met in the casual way you meet an artist in a book and move on. I mean met like you meet a place. Because Carrington doesn't just paint scenes, she builds personal cosmologies, private occult mythologies, little ecosystems where animals, women, symbols, stars, fantastic beasts and beings all carry secret weight. And something about that hit me hard. Not just her story, but the sensation her work creates. That you found a hidden hinge in the world, a way through. Her paintings feel like doorways, not into fantasy, but into the parts of reality we're trained to dismiss. And when I felt that doorway open, I knew I had to follow it. Carrington's story begins in a house that sounds like a chapter title, Crookie Hall. A grand English country estate, beautiful, imposing, heavy, gothic. The kind of place where the air itself feels disciplined, where silence is a rule and rules are invisible. And it's here, inside this gothic architecture of wealth and expectation, that Leonora's first labyrinth forms, because she grows up between two worlds, two belief systems, two competing kinds of real. Her father, Harold Carrington, is a successful textile entrepreneur, a man built for the material world, money, control, status, certainty. And Leonora later described him in a way that always sticks with me, like a kind of patriarchal boss figure, a mafiosi. A conservative, pragmatic presence rooted in the physical worldview. What can you prove? What can you own? What can you control? In that world, imagination isn't a compass, it's a problem. And Leonora from the beginning is a problem. But her mother is Irish, and with her comes another inheritance: stories, Celtic folklore, old myths, fairy tales with teeth. And the woman around her, mother, grandmother, the keepers of the unseen, encourage what the father's world tries to suppress: Leonora's imagination. So Carrington grows up living inside a strange tension, the religion of money versus the religion of myth. One world says, be respectable. The other whispers, be free. She's sent to convent schools, places designed to press people into shape, but Leonora doesn't hold the shape. She's expelled from more than one school, not because she's broken, but because she's uncooperative with obedience. She has 3 brothers, but she is the challenger, the one who pushes back, the one who refuses to accept the rules simply because they are rules. And when the world tells her to sit still, she becomes motion. Eventually, art becomes her exit route. She studies in Florence, Italy, absorbing the old masters, the medieval glow, the patience of craft. And then London, where modernity is loud and hungry, and you can almost feel her learning 2 things at once: how to paint, how to live as an artist. Not as a hobby, not as a polite accomplishment, but as a refusal. Because for Leonora, art isn't decoration, it's escape velocity. And then she encounters Surrealism, a movement that doesn't just allow the irrational, it celebrates it. A movement that says the unconscious matters, that dreams are not mistakes, that the strange is not childish, that the inner world is not a guilty secret. And for someone like Carrington, raised between a rigid Catholic structure and wild Celtic story, Surrealism isn't a style, it's permission. It's a match struck in a room full of gas. The Meal of Lord Candlestick, 1938. This painting is Carrington taking the polite world she was born into and turning it inside out. A banquet scene transformed into a grotesque myth of social power, appetite and control. Candlestick was her code name for her family, and Lord Candlestick points to the ruling presence of the household, a satirical father figure, presiding over the table like a domestic deity. The candle he embodies doesn't offer comforting light, its flame becomes a dragon, as if authority itself is a controlled blaze, dazzling, dangerous, and always capable of burning the room down. Around the feast, Carrington loads the table with omen objects: a flamingo, a small brown horse head, a bird skeleton, an altar built from instinct, cruelty and comedy. At one end, long-necked horse-giraffed women sit like stretched caricatures of refinement, elegance, pulled into something unnatural, and then the painting commits its most shocking act. A woman in a red dinner dress calmly eating a baby laid out on the table. It's obscene, yes, but it's also brutally symbolic, turning the idea of family into a literal image of consumption. What traditions can devour, what privilege can swallow, what power takes when it believes it is entitled. A huge green face with leaf hair looms near a carafe of red wine. The while pressing in on the domestic theatre, nature watching the performance of civilization with a patient, ancient stare. The whole scene reads as rebellion, not a quiet refusal, but a spell of exposure. Carrington doesn't argue with the upper-class table. She transforms it into a nightmare fable and makes its hidden hunger visible. And the question it leaves you with is sharp enough to cut. Who gets to feed? And who gets eaten at a respectable table? Her father's world, the bourgeois world of manners and money, starts to look like its own hallucination. And I think of that world as a symbol. Lord Candlestick, polished, upright, flammable, a figure that demands to be the only light in the room. But Carrington's gift is that she notices the obvious. Candles can be put out, doors can be opened, and you can walk away from the life someone else planned for you. And then she meets a painting by Max Ernst, and the doorway becomes a corridor, and the corridor becomes a labyrinth. Because once Carrington steps through this first door, there's no going back. If part 1 was the doorway, part 2 is the corridor. Because the moment Leonora Carrington steps into surrealism, it doesn't simply change her art. It changes her orbit, her language, her gravity. And then she meets Max Ernst, and the labyrinth begins to move. There's a moment in biographies that feels like a hinge, the ordinary day that isn't ordinary. In 1936, Carrington saw the work of the German surrealist Max Ernst at the International Surrealist Exhibition in London, and was attracted to him even before she met him. In 1937, Carrington met Ernst at a party at the Goldfingers in London with Sari Daines, who was a friend of Ernst. Leonora and Max Ernst arranged to meet in a cafe in London. He was surrealist royalty, older, magnetic, already a mythology. And the story often gets told like a romantic lightning strike. But Carrington's life is never just romance. It's escape, it's defiance, it's choice with consequences. She didn't fall into this world by accident. She walked in with her eyes open. Leonora was drawn to surrealism. And then there's Cornwall, a surrealist gathering by the sea in a house in a place called Lamb Creek in the Foul Estuary, not a million miles away from Truro, hosted by a man called Roland Penrose at his brother's house. It's the coast as threshold, solitaire, pagan undertones, the sense that the land itself is older than the people walking across it. It's easy to romanticize it, but this is also where Leonora first sees the movement up close. Not the posters and manifestos, the people. And people, as always, are complicated. The Bohemian gathering included Man Ray, Leonora and Max, of course, Lee Miller and Paul Uliard, amongst others. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Surrealism could be revolutionary in art and painfully old-fashioned about women. Many of the leading men were drawn to the idea of the femme enfant, the child woman, the young muse, the wild-eyed inspiration, a kind of living doorway they could step through, a beautiful generator, a spark to power their myth. But Leonora Carrington wasn't built to be anyone's poetic accessory. If she was a doorway, she was her own doorway. And the age gap between her and Ernst matters here, as context, because it's a story about power, about escape, about who gets to be the artist and who gets cast as the muse. Ernst is married. Leonora goes anyway. That sentence alone tells you something about her. She chooses the forbidden road, not for scandal, but because she can't breathe in the life her father mapped out. Paris becomes a fever dream. Cafes, artists, arguments, manifestos, parties where reality feels optional. And in the middle of it, she's painting and writing and learning how to survive in a movement that wants to devour you and praise you in the same breath. By the time Leonora Carrington paints this portrait, she's already done something quietly seismic. She steps out of the life her wealthy, proper family expected and into a life she chose. Art first, freedom first, the inner world taken seriously. In 1937, she meets Max Ernst, and the connection is immediate and catalytic. Not just romance, but a recognition between two people who live by symbols. That tension is in the painting's air. The landscape is wintered and strange mountains, ice, a green river running through like a vein through cold terrain, as if the world itself is turning inhospitable. Ernst appears not as a man you could meet in daylight, but as a figure Carrington has translated into her private cosmology. White-haired, wrapped in a red fur coat that reads like ceremonial regalia, one leg in a yellow and black striped sock, a mischievous crack in the solemn mask, and a merman tail that makes him a creature of crossings. He belongs to more than one element, land and water, waking and dreaming, the ordinary world and the one underneath it, the bird superior. The emotional core is what he carries, a translucent green lamp like a relic, being escorted through hostile weather. Inside the lamp glows a small horse, and for Carrington the horse is never just a horse. It's her recurring emblem of self, spirit, wildness, the part that refuses to be domesticated. So the lamp becomes a double sign. It can feel protective, like love sheltering something fragile from the freeze, but it can also feel like an enclosure, the self kept safe and kept close inside glass. And then she adds the second horse, pale and frozen in the distance, almost statue-like, a haunting biographical shadow. It's as if she's already sensing a split, one part of her spirit carried forward inside the lantern, one part left behind in the cold. Ernst walks through the frozen terrain like a dream that hasn't been told it will end, carrying a horse-lit flame through the dark, and Carrington, even here, is already doing what she will do again and again, turning lived experience into a secret language strong enough to survive it. Eventually, the politics within Surrealism begin to churn. Factions, loyalties, quarrels, and so Leonora and Max retreat from Paris to the countryside, Saint Martin d'Ardèche. For a while it's almost idyllic, a hidden pocket in the Labyrinth. They create a home that feels like a living artwork, sculptures in the garden, strange objects, murals as if they're trying to make a sanctuary where the outside world can't reach them. Leonora writes constantly, stories that feel like spells and practical jokes braided together, because her humour is part of her magic, a blade disguised as laughter. Carrington's surrealism is never just dream imagery. It's deep personal mythology and archetypes and also humour. There are stories of practical jokes and strange meals. Hair cut up and hidden in an omelette. Sargo dyed black and served as caviar. Absurd, yes, but also revealing, because she's already doing the thing she'll do forever, turning normality into humour into an experimental laboratory, turning social ritual into transformation, turning polite reality into a stage where the mask slips. This is the Carrington signature. The occult is not only in ancient books, it's in what we eat, what we pretend, what we swallow. World War II rises over France like a tide. Max Ernst, German-born, becomes a target. First arrested by the French as an enemy alien, released, then threatened again, and eventually arrested by the Gestapo afterwards. Leonora tries to free him. She moves like someone trying to pull a person out of a dream as it collapses. But the machinery of war doesn't bargain, it grinds. And with Ernst gone, the sanctuary becomes a trap. The labyrinth closes its jaws. This is where the story turns dark. With Max taken and Europe unravelling, Leonora breaks. Not in the neat way biographies tidy up, but in the way the mind sometimes does when reality becomes unbearable. The myth can't protect her anymore. The doorway doesn't lead to wonder now, it leads to terror, and then comes the journey south towards Spain. A rescue or an extraction, depending on how you look at it. A family friend, someone from the Carrington orbit. A figure arriving like an emissary from the old world, to drag her body through the chaos and get her out. Madrid, Spain. A new chapter that feels less like a corridor and more like an underworld. Carrington goes on her own journey, and what waits there is not just madness, but transformation, a symbolic, shamanic rebirth. In part 1, the doorway opened. In part 2, the corridor widened. In part 3, the labyrinth drops straight down. This is Leonora Carrington's descent into Down Below. This chapter of her life was later released as a book, so that she could tell this story but also be free of it. War, betrayal, institutional violence, delusion, and the long jagged climb back to herself. With Europe collapsing, Leonora travels with her friend Catherine in a small Fiat with Michelle alongside, toward Andorra and then Spain. In Andorra, she is climbing mountains and leaping from rock to rock, trying to calm her anguished nerves and physically overcome vertigo-like symptoms. She feels a deep affinity with the animals she meets in the mountains, almost like a psychic bond with them. I think she is in a way trying to facilitate her own healing through nature. A letter linked to her father's industrial contacts helps open doors at the border. Michelle remains behind. Leonora continues. She carries Max Ernst's passport, still holding a fragile hope she can secure him a visa. But by now her mind is fraying. She begins to believe her inner state is controlling events in the outer world, that thought and war are fused. By the time she reaches Madrid, reality is no longer stable ground. In Madrid, Leonora becomes increasingly vulnerable. She makes the acquaintance of a man called Van Gent, a Dutchman. This proves to make matters worse for her mentally. She goes to the British consulate, ranting that Van Gent is controlling the war through hypnosis. Fragments of fear, trauma and delusion are now fully entangled. She befriends a man named Alberto. She also speaks to the Madrid head of ICI, a company called Imperial Chemicals, of which her father is the principal shareholder. This event also connects her with a man called Dr. Pardo. A drive is proposed, supposedly to the beach for pleasure and sun. It is a trap. In the car, she is injected. She is taken to Santander. Her father's hand is behind it. Leonora arrives at the sanatorium with memory gaps and violent disorientation. Thinking she has survived a car accident and is in a hospital ward, she is told she is there for a rest. Treatment is brutal and, tragically for the era, not unusual. She is given cardiazol, inducing violent seizures. Later, electric shock-based methods replace or accompany this regime. She does not remember her first hours clearly, only aftermath, force and fear. She says she fought like a tigress, then straps, injections, blank spaces. This is not care, this is coercion dressed as medicine. Leonora fixates on Dr. Don Luis Morales, the small powerful psychiatrist with hypnotic eyes. In her psychosis, she believes he is linked to Van Gent in a vast conspiracy. She draws him in pencil, trying to trap darkness in lines. She writes, "To me, Van Gent was my father, my enemy, and the enemy of mankind. I was the only one who could vanquish him." She sees the same malign power in Morales. She is restrained again, at times naked, bitten by mosquitoes, reduced to body and terror. She begins to build up an inner cartography to survive, a semi-mythical map of the institution. At its center is Down Below, a Bejo, both a physical pavilion and a metaphysical destination, a place of bliss, truth, purification and release, a hidden chamber where everyone is finally at peace. When the world becomes unlivable, the mind builds a sanctuary. She describes a day when doctors and orderlies enter together and she feels she is about to fall forever in a dark well. Then comes a violent return, the first clearly remembered cardiazole seizure, convulsion, collapse, and after it, paradoxically, a sensation of mental release. Her suffering does not become noble, but consciousness shifts. Something in her begins to reorganize. She is moved to a brighter ward, the Sun Room in Covadonga. She later describes it as entering a world that felt like a mathematical expression of life. Eventually, she gains access to the Abejo Pavilion, and slowly more freedom inside the institution. Her Irish nanny arrives, unexpectedly reaching Santander via military transport, a warship. Shocked to find Leonora in an asylum, Leonora is now cleaner, clothed, intermittently calmer, though delusions still flare. She reads in the library. Dr. Morales occasionally drives her outside the grounds. She describes Dr. Morales. Don Louis was not a sorcerer, but a scoundrel, in her book Down Below. Another injection follows an outburst after the drive, and her nanny weeps. I think that not only was the treatment of her by him barbaric, but also he had a bizarre romantic interest in her, which explains why he was so suddenly keen to take her out on his drives. A true scoundrel indeed. Then comes a turning point. A man named Echevarria speaks with her plainly, rationally, without force. His calm reasoning helps pull her toward full lucidity. He explains the episode in the Andorra Mountains. Power over animals is a natural thing for a person as sensitive as you are. Leonora writes, he demystified the mystery which had enveloped around me and which they all seemed to take pleasure in deepening around me. A cousin, Dr. Guillermo Gil, half Spanish, half English, visits in Santander, takes tea with her and writes to the British ambassador in Madrid, at last, doors begin to open. Leonora is released to Madrid, temporarily under nursing supervision. Spain is now Franco's fascist state. The atmosphere is brittle, exhausted, watchful. Then the next blow. Her family plans to send her to a sanatorium in South Africa. The nurse departs. Leonora is placed on a train to Portugal. The map narrows again, but this time she will not be transported quietly. In Lisbon, placed with a woman guardian, Leonora asks to go into the city. At a cafe, she slips out the back and runs. She grabs a taxi and gives one instruction: the Mexican embassy. There, she reconnects with Renato Leduc, whom she knows from the Paris Circle of Artists and had seen in Madrid. They agreed to marry, a strategic act of rescue, not romance in the conventional sense, a legal shield against being sent away again. Freedom this time is paperwork plus nerve. Leonora writes, "I was as frightened of my own family as of the Germans." In Lisbon, she sees Max Ernst one last time. He has reached Portugal after Peggy Guggenheim helped secure his escape from France. A strange gathering of fugitives, children, artists and survivors. Did Max and Leonora rekindle their passion and love? They did not. The spell was broken. It was Leonora and Renato, Max and Peggy now. Peggy offers Leonora a place on the flight to New York. Leonora refuses. Instead, she leaves by boat with Renato Leduc to New York first and then eventually to Mexico. The underworld chapter closes, not healed, not erased, but carried forward, transformed into art. She never saw her father ever again, although she did see her mother again, though the events of that time in her life were never discussed. From now on, Leonora Carrington will build not just paintings, but entire cosmologies. Mexico, alchemy, the woman who changed. Her greatest period of art was yet to come. She got out, not because the world became kind, but because she stayed sharp inside catastrophe. After Lisbon, after the trap, after the sanatorium, Leonora Carrington lands in New York. The body is free, the mind is carrying the ruins, but this is the first breath after drowning. Carrington spends roughly a year in New York before moving on to Mexico. Timelines vary, but the 1941-42 window is the key span. New York is full of displaced Europeans, artists, poets, survivors, people remaking themselves in rented rooms and borrowed languages. Peggy Guggenheim opens Art of This Century in 1942, a crucial hub where exiled surrealists and emerging American artists collide. Leonora is in that atmosphere, close enough to feel the old orbit, far enough to know the old spell is breaking. Max Ernst remains a psychic centre of gravity, but no longer a destiny. The Lop-Lop era, bird god, lover, myth, has ended. In New York, their bond flickers one last time through image. Leonora paints a portrait of Max Ernst. Ernst paints a portrait of Leonora. Two artists rendering each other across distance, memory and fracture. Not as lovers in an idyll now, but as figures already becoming legend to one another. These portraits feel like the final exchange of mirrors. Recognition, debt, grief, release. In the book, The Invisible Painting by her son Gabriel, he writes of how she kept this painting of her that Max painted, and in time it was gifted to him. And yet, the horse and the bird part ways. perhaps with portrait paintings exchanged as parting gifts. The horse crossed the ocean, the bird flew elsewhere, and in Mexico, Leonora began to paint, not escape, but arrival. The testimony begins here. Carrington first writes an English version of Down Below in New York in 1942. That version is now lost. In 1943, she dictates a French version to Jean Magnin, who becomes the surviving textual basis. It appears in translation in VVV, with a French publication following later. This is not just memoir, it is reclamation. A woman taking events designed to annihilate her and turning them into authored form. That instinct to mythologize, encode, transform is not escapism, it is strategy. In late 1942, Carrington moves to Mexico, where she will spend most of the rest of her life. And Mexico at that time is not just a backdrop, it is a historical refuge zone. The Cardenas-era policy had already opened the country to large amounts of anti-fascist and Spanish Republican refugees, with asylum and naturalization pathways that made survival possible for many exiles. For Leonora, that policy becomes fate. Mexico offers a new constellation. Benjamin Perez, Remedios Varo, Katie Horner, Octavio Paz, and other thinkers and makers in the post-war expat intellectual scene. But rebirth is not instant. At first she feels isolated. New country, new language, emotional aftermath, and a marriage to Renato Leduc that was built for rescue, not permanence. They divorce in 1943. Mexico is mythic, yes, gods, death festivals, layered civilizations, landscapes that feel like thresholds, but she still has to learn how to live there as a person, not just as a symbol. Then comes Americo Chiki Weiss, Hungarian photographer, Holocaust survivor, exile, fellow carrier of history's fractures. He had worked within the European photojournalist world, linked to Robert Capa and the war years. Then fled Nazi occupation. The French Vichy government at the time sent him to a concentration camp in Morocco. Thanks to Robert Capa, the American consulate in Casablanca was able to grant him a Mexican visa. He boarded the Portuguese ship, the Serpa Pinto, a ship that saved the lives of many European refugees. So eventually he reached Mexico like so many displaced Europeans. Carrington marries Weiss in 1946. With him she builds something she has rarely had, continuity. They have 2 sons, Gabriel and Pablo. Not a fairy tale ending, a working life, a real one. Now the creative field opens. A key omen is the giantess, the guardian of the egg, a monumental feminine presence holding a world seed, surrounded by avian witnesses. It feels like announcement and oath at once. After everything she survived, Carrington isn't painting recovery as softness. She's painting sovereignty. This is the threshold of her major mature period. Alchemy, goddess forms, hybrid beings, cosmic architecture. Not borrowed surrealism, Carrington's own cosmology. She stands in the sea like an icon that wandered out of a chapel and into a medieval shoreline. Vast, blonde and unmoved. Her hair is not just hair, it's a wheat field, a halo of harvest, the earth wearing sunlight. Around her wheel wild geese, not merely birds but sentries, a circling spell that makes the air feel consecrated. Below, the world becomes busy and hungry. People run with ladders and tools. Boats crowd the water, shapes churn in the sea like folklore pretending to be fish. Everyone wants the egg she holds, a large speckled thing familiar as a bird's promise. yet enlarged into a relic. It feels sacred because it's unborn. The future, the soul seed, the truth not yet spoken, the fragile new life that must be protected from noise and possession. And she protects it without drama. That's the key. The giantess doesn't look cruel or vengeful. She looks calm, peaceful, almost angelic, as if she knows that some things can't be claimed by effort, ladders or desire. Beneath her, 3 women appear in that reoccurring triad in Carrington's world, like witnesses to a ritual, or faces of the same enduring feminine force. Elsewhere, a scythe-bearing figure chases a pale presence, a reminder that time and endings roam the edges of every story, but the guardian does not turn her head. This painting feels like a vow made visible, the great earth goddess standing between the crowd and what is sacred, a quiet law spoken without words, not yet. And the longer you look, the more it seems the egg isn't the only object in her hands. It's a threshold, a beginning, a secret world held steady until it's ready to hatch. She escaped Europe, she wrote the underworld, she found a new city between worlds and began to build worlds of her own. She did not return from the underworld unchanged. She returned with a method. In Mexico, Leonora Carrington becomes something rarer than a survivor, an adept, a working artist with a private cosmology, disciplined imagination, and a refusal to obey anybody's script but her own. Motherhood seems to ignite her deepest artistic current. With cheeky vice as a stabilizing presence at home, Leonora pours herself into painting, writing, and symbolic world building. In his book, The Invisible Painting, her son Gabriel describes growing up with Leonora as a mother. Life with my mother was filled with unexpected excitements. It was imperative that routine be overturned, so our existence was continually acquiring different flavors and shapes. Money was tight. At times they lived frugally. She was painting for her livelihood, surviving heat and scarcity with dark humor and persistence. At one point, Leonora was living off ice cream because it was cheap. The studio and the household were never truly separate worlds. For Carrington, domestic life and mythic life were one organism. Cheeky was everything she needed in a supportive husband and a father to the 2 boys. By 1953, Carrington is no longer the young runaway orbiting other people's myths. She's built a new life in Mexico City, not just a new address, but a new cosmic climate, a place where ritual, story, and the presence of the dead sit closer to daily life. She's a working artist, a mother, a maker of worlds, who has survived the rupture years and is now painting from a steadier ground, the bright underworld, where myth isn't an escape hatch, it's a way of living. It's a piece that feels like it's alive, engaging you and drawing you in. We enter a mystical hall, tall, calm, ceremonial. At a table sit 2 boys, often read as modelled on her sons, and the whole scene carries that intimate charge. Childhood placed inside the sacred without irony. They study crystal spheres like instruments of perception, as if the lesson isn't believe in magic, but learn to see. In Carrington's universe, vision is a discipline. Across from them is the daughter of the Minotaur, a white bull-like figure that's strangely tender and sovereign at once. The title promises monster myth, but Carrington refuses the usual brutality of the Minotaur's story. She doesn't give you horror, she gives you presence. A horned being that feels like a guardian of lineage, instinct, and older truths. Nearby stands a plant-like dryadish figure in the sense of a nature spirit at the table, which can easily read as Carrington herself. Not the artist outside the painting, but the resident intelligence of the room. This feels like initiation, guided by loving knowledge for the 2 boys in the painting. On the floor, 2 white dogs watch like faithful witnesses animal consciousness holding the ceremony steady, and then your crushed red rose, a small bruise of colour, a soft tragedy pressed into the otherwise controlled calm. It could be lost love, yes, but it could be also something broader. Beauty sacrificed, desire flattened, or the sacred symbolism of the red rose reclaimed. Biographically, it's hard not to feel this painting as part of Carrington's post-descent life. A world rebuilt after breakdown, after exile, after the violent unpredictability of history, now reassembled into an interior architecture where the strange is not a threat, but a language the family can share. The crystal balls aren't fortune-telling props, they're like training wheels for the imagination. The mythic beings aren't intruders, they're guests. The children aren't frightened, they're engaged. And that's the real spell of this work. It shows Carrington's mythology maturing into communion. She takes an ancient beast story and rewrites it as an initiation without terror, a quiet scene where the next generation is learning how to look into the world's hidden mirrors, while the room, calm and ceremonial, continues long after we leave. In Mexico City, Carrington forms one of the great creative friendships of 20th century art with Remedios Varo alongside Katie Horner. In that feverish post-war milieu, the three become known as the Three Witches, not as a gimmick, but as an ethic. Women reclaiming symbolic power from a culture that preferred women as muses, not makers. They traded ideas, recipes, images, esoteric texts, jokes and methods of survival. They made the everyday uncanny and the uncanny practical. And when Varo died in 1963, Carrington was devastated. A central star in her inner constellation went out. After years in Mexico, Carrington's public profile grows. Her first solo exhibition at Galeria Claire de Cour marks a major threshold, encouraging critical response and sustained press attention in the months that followed. By now, her language is unmistakable. Hybrid creatures, ritual scenes, alchemical vessels, feminine intelligence and vast interior geographies. This is no longer a surrealist girlfriend who paints. This is a sovereign painter building a durable cosmology. Carrington's occult life isn't decorative, it's structural. Alchemy, tarot, Celtic myth, Kabbalistic and Hermetic currents, esoteric anthropology, dream logic, humour and rebellion. She blends them into a living symbolic practice. Her paintings operate like visual alchemy, inner and outer worlds continuously transmuting. She resists rigid doctrine, no closed system, no priestly gatekeeping. Her myth is personal, evolving, absurd, and anti-authoritarian. And in the 1950s, she creates her own tarot cycle of the major arcana, another sign that she isn't merely influenced by symbols, she is actively reauthoring them. In 1963, she creates El Mundo Mágico de los Mayos for Mexico City's Museo Nacional de Antropología, fusing her symbolic vocabulary with deep engagement in Maya cosmology. Then history intrudes violently, the 1968 student movement and the Tlatelolco massacre. Carrington responds in Operation Wednesday, commemorating the dead and the wounded. This is personal too, with her sons involved in student activism. This painting feels like Carrington turning grief into procedure, not a dream scene, but an operation in the truest sense, a deliberate act performed against the erasure of pain. Made in the wake of the 1968 student movement and the Tlatelolco massacre in Mexico City, it has the quiet gravity of commemoration, a ritual of witness disguised as surgery. Two translucent surgeons lean in, weightless and otherworldly, performing work that reads as both physical and psychic. Their bodies are barely there, like spirits of medicine, or the thin membrane between care and haunting. They operate on a seated figure swallowed in a massive black veil, not simply dressed in mourning, but becoming mourning, as if grief has taken the shape of a person. The scene is tender without being comforting. The tenderness is an act itself in the refusal to look away. On the floor, tiles become a ledger. Marks and writing lie beneath the figures like tallies, like evidence, like a count that must be kept so that the dead don't slip into statistics and fog. Nearby, small presences gather, a goblin-like attendant, a tiny skeletal scribe, death reduced to a clerk, writing in a book as if history is being recorded in the same room as the operation. And beside them, the dead white dove, peace rendered not as an idea, but as a body, spent and unmistakable. Yet Carrington never leaves you only in the black. Above the veiled figure hover hummingbirds, one made of light, one made of shadow, like twin messengers, spirit doubles, a pulse continuing in two registers at once, hope and grief, life and aftermath. It's not optimism, it's survival. It's the smallest possible motion against the weight of what happened. Bonham's notes on the work connect it to the political trauma of Mexico in that period, and the painting carries that charge. Mourning not as private sorrow, but as communal memory that demands care. In the end, Operation Wednesday doesn't ask you to understand tragedy, it asks you to witness it, and to recognize that healing when it is honest, and to recognize that healing as a form of resistance. The ritual continues. The book is still being written. The surgeons still bend over the wounded, translucent with devotion, while a small bird of light insists the spirit has not been fully extinguished. In 1972, she designs Mujeres Conciencia for Mexico's women's liberation movement, advancing her long insistence that women reclaim their legendary powers and political agency. She also joins artists and intellectuals campaigning around the imprisonment of Sophia Bassi, part of a broader ethic. Art is not separate from solidarity. Carrington continues to cross mediums. In the early 1970s, she contributes to the film The Mansion of Madness. Set, costume and artistic design by her, with Gabriel Weiss involved. Another family art overlap where the white horse motif rides through cinema as alter ego. Her political commitment remains active through later decades. Recognition follows, including major feminist art acknowledgements. In the 1980s, she moves between Mexico and periods in New York, but Mexico remains her central ground. Chiki dies in 2007, a man who stayed with her as long as he could. Someone who gave her a much more stable and solid life than Max Ernst ever could. Leonora keeps working, painting, writing, and creating sculpture almost until her own death in 2011. Chiki died at the age of 97 and Leonora at the age of 94. No final style freeze, no retreat into nostalgia. She stays in motion. In the beginning, she was cast as a muse. In the middle, she was nearly erased. In the end, she authored a universe. The horse never stopped running. The labyrinth never stopped changing. But somewhere between Mexico's streets, her kitchen table, her tarot, her sons, her sisters in art, and her impossible creatures, Leonora Carrington found the only exit that mattered. Not escape from the world, but the power to remake it. Some artists leave works, a few leave worlds. Leonora Carrington left a world that keeps expanding after her death, across museums, books, cinema, political memory, and the imaginations of people she never met. The doorway never closed, it just changed hands. In 2010, Britain staged a major re-encounter with Carrington's work, Surreal Friends, at Pallant House Gallery, Chichester, then the Sainsbury Centre, Norwich, placing Carrington alongside her closest creative allies, Remedios, Varo and Katie Horner. It wasn't just an exhibition, it was a correction, a reminder that Surrealism's history was never only male, however often it was narrated that way. Carrington is now widely credited with helping feminize Surrealism, not by joining the old script, but by rewriting it. Her paintings and writing insist that women are not symbolic accessories, not femme enfant, but artists in full command of image, intellect and mythic authority. She did not ask to be admitted to the canon, she altered the shape of it. In 2022, the 59th Venice Biennale took its title, The Milk of Dreams, from Carrington's book. Curator Cecilia Alemani described it as a world where life is constantly reimagined, where beings can transform and become other selves. This is Carrington's signature gift, metamorphosis without permission slips. In the same year, her short story, The Debutante, also reached new audiences through animation, proof that her strange humour and feral intelligence still travel cleanly across mediums and generations. Carrington's life has also been reframed for younger and broader audiences, from children's non-fiction biographies to experimental films documenting her domestic universe with her son Gabriel. Legacy here is not marble, it is conversation, mother to child, artist to artist, image to image. In November 2023, Mexico's Senate hosted a posthumous tribute to Carrington's work, including the display of El Jaguar de la Noche and the temporary exhibition Un Viaje Sagrado. It felt fitting. Mexico did not just shelter her in exile, it became the terrain where her mature cosmology took full form. In May 2024, Carrington's Le Distraction de Dagobah sold at Sotheby's, New York for $28.5 million, setting a record for a British-born woman artist at auction. The number matters because markets shape visibility, but the deeper point is older than the hammer price. She was never rediscovered by money. She was always there, building a world ahead of its audience. They once called her a muse. History now calls her an architect. The horse ran beyond the estate walls. The bird vanished into another sky. The labyrinth remained, and she learned to live at its centre. Leonora Carrington did not paint escape. She painted transformation. And long after the century that tried to contain her, her door is still open. If imagination is a form of freedom, Carrington left us a map. The doorway is still there.